Right. Yes.
Troup, Smooch, and the Dog Show. Another new episode is coming up tonight.
It's the Dog Show. It's the Dog Show. It's the Dog Show. It's the Dog Show.
You're listening to the one and only Dog Show. Your hosts, Troup Brenson and Smooch Moncrief.
Just two dudes talking Georgia football.
Welcome, dog fans, to the one and only Dog Show with Troup and Smooch and special guest, Coach Hayes.
I've got it. There it is.
Coach Hayes, Hayes, Coach Hayes.
And interestingly enough, guys, the voice you hear on that bumper is Bob Euchre, who just passed away recently at what age of 90?
Wow.
Yeah, it's 90 years old.
90 years old.
Well, that is an homage then. Yes.
Welcome back. And this is the third part to our series, the conclusion to Bobo's fault. And we're going to kind of hash it out here, and not just based on our first two episodes, but based on what we've seen over the past couple of years. Kind of where do we fall? Smooch, I'm going to let you kind of kick off the conversation.
Yeah. So where I fall, first of all, I, like many of you listeners, thought there were points of this season, especially at the end when it matters most, where this did not look like a product, for lack of a better word, that was up to Georgia Bulldogs standards. And when you see that, you want that to be head should roll, right? You want that to be fixed. You want there to be repercussion because, someone said Georgia fans are spoiled. Well, that may be true, but it's also demanding excellence. Like once you learn to expect excellence, you learn to demand excellence, and that's what separates elite teams from not elite teams. And so there were times where this team was just not elite this year. And so you have to come down to where it is. And so I am extremely frustrated. If I were the coach, and I'm not, I would be leaning toward Bobo being done in Athens. However, we also have the best coach in college football as the head coach of the Georgia Bulldogs. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there are areas in my life, like what I do for a living, for instance, where I understand what my strengths are and that I'm quite good at what I do. And none of those have to do with coaching a college football team. And we have the best man in the world doing it at Georgia. So where I come down is I take my desire, which is a fresh start at that position, and at the OC position, and I back it off, and I basically say, Kirby, this is you. We trust. We might not trust in Bobo, but we trust in Kirby. You do your thing. So whatever your decision is, that's what I'm ready to roll with. And Troup, Coach, that is where I've gotten to over this last week or so.
So ultimately, and I understand what you're saying. We can have questions and not be happy, but the buck stops again with Coach Smart, and I've grown to trust him and sometimes doubt him along the way. And then my doubt is usually proven wrong. And I'm like, okay, well, just shut up. Coach Smart's going to sign a great recruiting class no matter what's happening in June or July. And he's going to replace coaches when it's necessary. He's going to put the best people in there. I kind of agree with you with that, just with what you said, that, if you believe in Coach Smart and his decision making, and he's as good as he is at his job, who are we, according to what you said, and who are we to go away from Coach Smart? He's proven himself right over and over and over.
Having coaching experience, 20 plus years, and seeing the ramifications of watching kids grow up in front of you over a 4-year period and being able to develop relationships with those kids, not only on the football field, but just in the game of life. I've also had to deal with probably the exact opposite of that from the fandom of people who want to see people win. And unfortunately, as a coach, I tend to go in with a very even keel perspective. I tried myself not to be too biased. Do I question things? Sure. But that's the beauty of this game. It is a continuous chess match between two people who are lining up their athletes against one another, and they're figuring out their chess pieces to find out, do I have the ability to out execute you to beat you because we're even on the field with our athletes, or do I have better athletes than you do and I go out and do my job? And we've also seen it the other way, where you have someone who's out athleted but gets out executed, and sometimes that ends up being those games where you see the upsets. What I have a tendency to do is I look at the fluidity of your chemistry on your football team, and this year we didn't have it. I'm just going to say it flat out.
Did not.
And it became very evident with the Carson Beck drama that we got at the end when he declared for the NFL draft, which I thought was his right decision to do. I guarantee you he got a poor grade. He decided to pull back. That's why he retracted his NFL draft status and why he's gone to Miami, because I really do think that Georgia had cut ties with him. Say what you may, he had lost the locker room. I don't think there was a lot of people who put a lot of trust in that. And when you lose your quarterback in the locker room, that says a lot going forward about your offensive production. So not only do you lose Lad McConkey and Brock Bowers, don't even let me, if anybody who's got a pulse has seen his offensive production, their offensive production this year in the NFL, and even with the inclusion of Rosemy Jack Saint, who did some great things for Georgia in his last year there, we know and saw what they did. If you think about it, Lovett, Bell, Smith, all were supporting roles to that, and unfortunately couldn't keep up with that productivity once they were put into the light, to the spotlight. You just saw that. When we have execution of our running game, we were not the best running football team this year, and that is not a Georgia trademark at all. You establish the game by having an effective ground game behind probably the most experienced line I thought we were bringing back. I raved about this in the offseason.
Yes.
8 to 10 deep, thinking that we would have no problems. And yet it became to be something that was truly a misnomer as we went through the year. So when I think about all of those things together, Coach Bobo is trying to do everything he can to keep this offense afloat. And unfortunately, it fell through for him. There's a lot of stats you can look at, a lot of things that you can portray to make things look good. It's easy to hindsight anything that he has done this year, especially from my perspective, who understands ball. It also is on the backside cherry picking every poor play that I want to make him look bad. For every one play he did, I'm also looking at those positive plays that he did well too. But when it comes down to it, I know that Kirby, I know that Mike sat down and said, listen, just like with me, I've coached with a guy who was not a very good head coach, but he was a hell of an OC because you took that head coaching, cap off of his head. He all of a sudden got better because he wasn't thinking about all those other things. Some people are just not cut out for that. And it gets to the point where I think Coach Bobo is going to help Coach Smart out and probably end up stepping down before Coach Smart has to say, you're fired. Because I think those things are understood between those two gentlemen because of their friendship. And Mike's not stupid. He's going to tell Coach Smart, listen, we didn't do what we needed to do. I think we need some fresh meat that's going to come in here and revive us and do some good things. That's just my personal feelings. But if he does come back next year, again, the trust for Coach Smart, I will have to stand behind because that's the only thing going forward that gives me any trust value to what we have. But also, too, we're recruiting some Jimmies and Joes. They're coming. They're coming in. And all of a sudden, we've got those guys out there that are going to produce for us. We can see how that happens with whatever OC we have out there leading that offense next year as we move forward. So am I against him going? I think that I would probably say I would be not against him going. But if he shows up next year, I'm again behind you, what you said, Smooch, and to trust Coach Smart with that judgment of what he's doing. But it comes down to the fact I think Coach Bobo makes that decision because I think contractually their contracts run out at the end of January. So with that being said, we've still got this time. I still think in this little 2-week window we've got left, we might see some transitions start happening.
Yeah, a lot of people are predicting they're going to be. I even saw David Pollock saying, which I don't know how much he knows, that he expected to see some movement in Georgia's coaching staff. And I think you're exactly right, Coach, that Coach Smart's not going to fire Bobo, not that way. It'll be Bobo when it's time for him to go, he'll resign. He'll take another role, or he'll have something else he wants to spend time with. It won't be coach. People are worried about or saying Coach Mark can't fire his best friend. He won't.
Oh yeah,
but he won't.
But he'll do
the optics of it won't be a firing.
No. You're exactly right. That worded very well right there. Yes.
So I understood when Monken left and Bobo was the analyst, and they hired him because Georgia was on such a good roll, and the continuity piece of it made sense to me, and because he's got the terminology, they expecting to run a very similar offense, and so I was like, continuity is what, when you just win 2 national championships, we want to keep as many things the same as we can, but it comes down to continuity at what price, and that you only get so much rope, and so there was lots of part of this year where some of those things crept in, and I didn't want to listen to the naysayers who just hate Bobo but to hate Bobo. But when I kept watching games, and there was just a lack of creativity sometimes, and the plays didn't flow to the point where I felt like in the second half, he was going to have a few plays for you where it was going to make, in the time you needed it. When Georgia only lost 2 regular season games this year, but I expected to see some of those things in a big game where you say, okay, this is Mike Bobo. He's in his bag. It might have happened once or twice this year, but nowhere near enough for me so I couldn't question in my own mind if he's the right guy, and if I'm just hoping he just moves on. So I went back and forth, but really towards the end of the season, I was like, okay, I think he's competent. I just don't think he's spectacular. Now, maybe you don't need spectacular. Maybe it's hard to find spectacular. So maybe it's easier said than done to find that level of just genius or creativity. What we think is sometimes uncreative because the results don't bear out the way we want it to. In a coach's meeting or when they reviewed it, they're like, man, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. Maybe we didn't execute it the way we wanted to. And so when you have some of these players who they did regress this year, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that we had regression across the board on offense. Find where place where we didn't have regression other than punter.
Punter was great.
Yeah, Thorson's terrific. So, but it was regression, and so when you think about that, and then I'll go back and say, okay, well, in 2023, Coach, you said this, we averaged over 40 points a game, and people will use this part against Bobo when they say, well, but he had Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey and Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint. He should have averaged 40 points a game. He didn't have those guys this year. So either it's about the Jimmies or the Joes, or it's not.
That's a good point.
And so, if your personnel's right and your players perform up to their standard, and this could be an outlier season, and Georgia's offense could be. And I heard somebody say the squeaky wheel gets the
oil.
It does. And so you don't think that offensive part of the game is going to get a lot of attention this year on the offensive line?
Yes.
And yes, it will. And then you got players like Nitro Tuggle, Sokovie White, Zach Branch, Noah Thomas, Talon Taylor, CJ Wiley, Dylan Bell, London Humphreys. You got some skill players that can push this offense. And then, of course, you got Frazier, Branson, Robinson. I don't know how much we can expect from Rod next year. And Bowen, and then the Phillips kid. So they got some skill players. Hopefully they step in there, and you got some weapons. It all looks good on paper, but that's where I'm kind of going with that.
Go ahead, Smooch.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, just to kind of hammer in Troup's thesis here, and I'll throw it right to you, Coach. When you've got a drop off at the talent at talent like we did this year, when you don't, we said this about Saban leaving Alabama, it's true about Brock. You don't lose Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey and get better at the position. It's just not going to happen. So when you have a talent drop off, it does put a higher focus on the coordinator, because a coordinator the team is comfortable with or understands his Jimmies and Joes can raise their level of play, can give them more confidence, and have them maybe elevate their production above what they're actually truly capable of on their own. But what happened this year, Coach, and you touched on it earlier, we made weaker players work harder. When you're coordinating and we've got Monken's offense, you've got McConkey and A.D. Mitchell and Bowers running around at Washington, running around wide open at times. We didn't really have that. We made weaker players work harder, and I think that affected their confidence. And I think as an OC or any coach that's self-aware, sort of when, I know I can get this done. It just might not be here with this group of kids right now. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, to caveat off of that as well, when you have guys like I told you that were ancillary type players just complimenting, and you're only getting maybe 2 to 3 targets per game. Now these guys were the ones being targeted 9 to 10 times a game, and they underperformed. It's just flat out what happened.
Yeah.
You can sit there and talk about Carson Beck and the drop balls that he had, and that really can just make you scratch your head too. But that comes down to the performance of those 3 receivers not being able to handle that responsibility, period. They underperformed. Period. Carson Beck losing the locker room, causing probably drama as the year went on.
He most certainly did.
As the head scratchers. That's the reason why you saw the inconsistencies we saw offensively. But to come back to what even Troup was saying a while ago, when it looks like the regression of players, all of a sudden I'll refer to something I mentioned in the previous podcast that we did when we were talking about Bobo's downfall with some of his play calling, is that Trey Scott, for example, the defensive line coach, man, a lot of people didn't like what he was doing right out of the gate either. And then all of a sudden you bring in people like Jalen Carter, you bring people in like Jordan Davis, Trayvon Walker, Devontae Wyatt. All of a sudden, it's a world beater difference. All of a sudden, he needs a pay raise. Hey, man, this recruiter's on fire. This coach is on fire. He's doing a great job. Well, it's not like he's not doing the same thing with these other kids that he has as well. He's got to learn to improve the performance of the mid-level kids and your good kids that can become great. That's all about the development that you want to see and what we kind of hang our hat on at University of Georgia. Ladd McConkey, for example, at wide receiver position. But that's the reason why Coach Coley and Coach Searles and those guys need to be under the radar. And as a head coach, you're looking at those things, not micromanaging them, but you're also evaluating them. And I'm sure when they did their end of the year evaluation, which I don't know when Coach Smart does that with his position guys, but when they sit down and say, this is how you performed, we underperformed this year at this position, what are we going to do to change that? Well, it's going to help with the fact of Coach Searles finally getting in all his recruits. And, a lot of people think that the offensive line is just going to be completely gone with everybody that left. But if you think about it, 4 of the 5 guys that they'll have next year have probably total 250, 300 plus snaps when you got Monroe Freeland, Micah Morris, Drew Bobo, and Ernest Green. I mean, those 4 guys alone could be part of your starting rotation next year that have 300 plus snaps apiece of playing time. So it's not just that. It's also bringing in those kids that you finally recruited that you have the ability to play with. Same thing with Coach Smart. You come in that first year, you have to play. You're establishing your culture. You're trying to build confidence in that team that you have, but you're playing with kids that Coach Rick had recruited. Once you get your 3 years of transition time with your kids now, it then shows what he did and just miraculously in his second year taking us to the national championship game, which was unprecedented. But then to take us over that 3-year period and obviously what we saw in the dominance of him doing in his decade of time now that he's been back at his alma mater. So I see the same thing happening. And that's the reason why I'm willing to give Coach Searles another year to see what he does with his kids that he's developing in his system. And then you can say same thing with Coach Coley, hell of a recruiter, but everybody's compromising the fact that he's not a good wide receiver coach. I don't agree with that. I think you allow these kids to come in like Troup said a while ago about all the recruiting talent that's coming in with the kids they've retained from the portal from last year. Nobody's even thinking about Kobe Young. From what I understand, Kobe Young should be dropped of all of his charges. He should be back with the team next year, I hope. I haven't heard anything differently.
Yeah.
And then with the kids we've just gotten in the transfer portal from the USC, from the branch, Zachariah Branch, and then, of course, Noah Thomas from Texas A&M. And the portal opens up again, later in the spring too, which I know that's about to change. But, there's so many changes that are going to take place between now and even post-spring practice to where I just feel like those transitions are going to happen. They're going to be needing to happen. They're going to polish themselves the way we need to see them. And Coach Smart's not going to leave one stone unturned when it comes to changing what we have with this program going forward.
Love it.
Absolutely.
So a month from now, what prediction do you have, Smooch? Is Bobo going to be here, or Bobo going to be gone, or doing something else?
I think Bobo is not the offensive coordinator at Georgia in a month. I'm not even saying he leaves the Georgia Bulldogs. I'm just saying I don't think he's the offensive coordinator at Georgia in a month. That's kind of where I am, Coach.
And real quickly, and I'll let you go. I was going to segue off what you just said, Smooch, is that's the reason why I was talking about the head coach who wasn't a good head coach, moved to offensive coordinator and was a world beater. I think that's something that Coach Bobo could do. Move back into some type of analyst role, takes a little less off of him, like what Coach Muschamp did this year. Still have his foot in the door, still be able to coach a little ball, because it's hard to take the old ball coach out, but that puts him in a less aggressive situation. He's still helping the program, and he's letting a young buck or somebody that they look at hiring for that position.
So
I agree that he'll be. I agree with Smooch. I think he'll be in an analyst role of some sort, but not the OC next year.
Yeah, well, I think he's going to be the OC. I think he's going to be another.
You do? All right.
I do. I'm not saying I agree with it. I just think that with the regression, and then and a lot of it comes down to who you turn to. If you got somebody in mind, if Coach Smart's got somebody in mind, maybe they're both talking about somebody right now that they want to. They've had communication with.
It's hard to look at those wide receivers and tight ends coming in and walk away. I can see, especially when you think you could vindicate yourself.
Well, another thing too, I think everybody thinks the one that's going to come in and do the savior of this is Buster Faulkner. I like Buster Faulkner as an OC, but I don't know if he has the personnel that he wants to do with his own, the way he runs his offense. I don't know if we have the true quarterback that even if Gunner is the guy, because I'm going to go ahead and put a little extra caveat there that I don't think Gunner Stockton's QB1 next year. I don't think I don't think that's going to happen. But also too, it's just like with our tight end play. Haven't we done it in pairs? Isn't it cool how we've had everything sort of come in pairs? You kind of feel like right now it's Delp and Lucky, it's Heinrich and Riddell, and then you now got Barber and Elias Williams coming in. And honestly, I don't think Ethan Barber is going to be a tight end before it's all said and done. I think they because of his body type, I think he ends up being a better X than a Y. And I think he fits a lot like what Lucky does at the H position. He's going to be a hybrid kid that's going to be really special.
I worry about some of these kids. There's so much talent, but there's so much talent, and he's one of those guys I think could blossom and be just what I saw in the playoffs, in the high school playoffs. I'm like, this guy he could be a beast. Just the attitude he plays with, and the skill, way he uses his hands. I'm like, oh, please find a way to use this guy and keep him on campus. So they have several of those kind of players, and Riddell is another one. I'm like, I think he is a different kind of a cat too. I hope we began to see him. So, Depp is coming back. But, Georgia has shown you they use 3 tight ends. They'll find a way to get 3 tight ends playing time. So,
shoot, I would even have 14 personnel in there. I'd have Yap on both sides, 2 tights, 2 wings, and you have 4 pass catchers that can block. I mean, that's phenomenal.
So no Stockton. You think it's going to be a portal guy or Pugsy?
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to be I don't really know. My feelings just have Puglisi. I think somehow, some way, he's the one who it comes in if they don't go after some kind of portal kid. But I just don't see how you can bring in a portal kid and just expect him. Yeah, that's going to be someone who is going to fit that bill. I think what they're trying to do right now is fit the Rashada move. But I mean, I sit there and watch like what they did on UGA Sports. They filmed about 12 minutes of Sugar Bowl pre-practice play in the facility, and I'm sitting there watching the quarterback play and watching what happens. I mean, Puglisi I don't know, there's just something about him, the moxie, the way he carries himself. He does all the little, not saying, and I'm not hating on Gunner. I really like Gunner Stockton. It's just, I look at their ability when you put them side by side, and I just think Ryan, as long as he's processing the playbook, I just think that he has that ability to take that job over. The problem is I don't have any sample size of plays. We missed him in the spring. We had so much inconsistency during the year. We never got to see our second and third quarterbacks play due to his injury back in the spring. So we never got a chance to see him rep one time. So, maybe he goes out there and he shows me something. But just watching that practice of about 12 minutes and watching him do like the 7-on-7 Skelly where he got flushed out of the pocket, and they're doing a really good job of simulating things where it's not just sit back and throw, and just watching him and his footwork and his shoulder mechanics and just doing the little things that just make me see that's a solid quarterback that you want to see back there. There's another kid. I didn't even know this kid's a walk-on, I think, from Perry.
Ginn?
His name's Coulter Ginn. I mean, you look at his frame. Oh, my God. And he's got such a great mechanics. I mean, very solid throwing motion. Fluid. I mean, I'm sitting there watching him behind I think it's Helander is the other one that they got, and of course, and Rashada, is in there as well, which I know he's gone now. But I'm sitting there just watching those quad mechanics. I've watched so many quarterbacks in my lifetime warming up and doing things, and I know it's a lot different when you've got to process and you've got to change plays at line of scrimmage and all those things that go into it. But just watching those kids and going through the motions of their sequencing and what they had to do, there's just something to me that just sticks out with Puglisi, and that's the reason why I just see that he has just a higher ceiling than Gunner does. That doesn't mean that Gunner, because as we saw with the moxie and what he brings to the table, if he solidifies the chemistry and the offensive playbook, and as well as brings all the offensive players together and they believe in him, you want the guy that they believe in that's going to be under center next year. So
wow, a bomb dropped by Coach right here.
Well, we're definitely going to clip this little hot take nugget from Coach and use it. That's definitely some good stuff, Coach. I love it. And we want competition at the quarter. Let like we said, start the season, put the talent in a box and let the killer come out. Best man win. That's what you want.
And honestly, I forgot to say this. That's the beauty of this offseason. To me, whoever wins QB1 for the first time ever, I think legitimately is that QB1, because this is probably the most competitive situation for our quarterback position to finally legitimize the fact that whoever is called QB1 day one, I really do feel like that's the one who's qualified to do it. I don't think it has anything to do with what we've seen on tape. Next in line, that kind of mentality. I think it's who truly competes and does their job the best and executes the most that puts it on paper for them to say, we've got to start this guy. So it's beautiful.
Awesome stuff. Smooch is writing this down. He said,
I'm writing it down. I'm putting writing the counter down.
All right.
I didn't mean to get off on a tangent there, but that
was that spontaneous magic you always hope will happen on one of these.
Love it. We all hope that. I'm glad Coach has seen something. We want to see more of Puglisi and all these wide receivers, and not to take anything away from Gunner, because he may win a championship next year. But you want more than one player, because players get injured. You want good competition to push each other, and these guys have good camaraderie. And I think they're both kind of players who, regardless who wins it, the other guy is not contacting Ohio State and seeing if he can get out of here or something like of that nature. So I kind of like that too. Anyway. Thank you, folks, for tuning in to our conclusion. I hope we shed a little light, and, we could do much more and go much deeper. But for what you guys pay us to do, I think this was adequate. Because we just want to reflect some of you guys. Really, we just want to reflect what you folks are talking about, what you're feeling, because we are feeling the same way. We kind of go back and forth on it as well. We all had a good conversation about it. But love it. Smooch and Coach said Bobo's gone. I think he'll probably be around at least another season.
Yeah, one of us will be right.
We'll see how it plays out. Thank you, gentlemen. I love this series. Such good stuff. Thanks for all the work you did, Coach Hayes. Again, that's Coach Hayes Huddle. He is killing it, folks, and we just love to watch his stuff. And that he will share it with us is just beautiful.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate y'all.
All right, let's wrap it up. Smooch, take us home.
So Gunner might not be quarterback, and Bobo might not be coordinator. Right.
This is the Dog Show with Troup and Smooch.
So much to think about.
Love it.
Talking about leaving them with a cliffhanger right there.